Most of us hope to leave a bunch of money behind for our children after we kick the proverbial bucket. But there's a growing movement to die with zero after the popular book by the same name by Bill Perkins. And to hash this out with us, we've brought in Rob Beardsley. He's the founder and CEO of Lone Star Capital, which is a real estate syndication firm. So, Rob, is the argument just that we shouldn't raise our kids to be spoiled brats who become vapid heiresses, or is there more to this philosophy than that?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And this is a really fun and interesting topic that has so many facets, right? We're talking about your life, you're talking about leaving behind, like you said, assets to your children and stuff like that, estate planning and things like that. So, as far as leaving money behind, I think myself personally and the book as well doesn't say, hey, don't not give your kids any money and make them resent you, because that's unfortunately what would inevitably happen if you do have money to leave behind and you don't. However, in my opinion, and when I hopefully have children soon, my plan is to actually not wait until I die to benefit my kids with my money. And so, specifically, what I plan to do is to hopefully help them at critical points in their lives to give them the best leg up and to propel them on top of their own motivation, right? Because obviously, the worst thing that money does is it robs someone of their ambition. So that's never what I would want to do for my kids or for anyone else. And so instead, I'd want to supercharge their ambition or to embolden them to do something. For example, like get married young and have start a family young, because I'm providing them the seed capital to do so by way of perhaps the down payment on a house or paying for the wedding or things like that to really kickstart them, rather than saying, well, you know what? You'll get all this money when I die, right? God willing that I have a lot of it to give, which the book talks about. Actually, the average bequeathing in America occurs at 63. So that means that most people actually don't die at 63, but they actually inherit money when they themselves are 63 years old. So imagine you inherit, let's say you have rich parents, you're lucky enough to have rich parents, and then you inherit their money at 63. Wouldn't you have loved to have gotten that when you were 43 or 23?
Yeah, when it's potentially more useful for you earlier in your life when you have less money, maybe when you're having kids or buying a house or, is trying to start a business and get that off the ground. That makes total sense. And before we hit the record button today, you were talking about, I think it was the time optimization for money, and I may have gotten that expression wrong. But yeah, walk us through that philosophy as it relates to this concept.
Yeah, this is something that I think when you hear it, it makes sense, but all of us are programmed to not think like this at all, right? We're all programmed to save, delay gratification, which I am a huge fan of, and I think that the Stanford marshmallow test of delayed gratification is perhaps one of the single best markers of success, right? Or future success. So I love delayed gratification. So we're all taught to save and invest in our future and to hopefully retire one day and so on. But there's a few things that are broken with that, right? Obviously, like we mentioned, your need for money is different in different periods of your life. So when you're younger and a kid, you probably have no need for money, but then you become older, you start your life, you need money for a family and so on, your liabilities grow. And then you hit a point where it peaks and then drops off, especially once your kind of health declines, it drops off precipitously because you're not going to Italy for your summer anymore and you're not doing this and that. And so your need for money goes down very little until, of course, at the very end of your life where your medical costs spike because you have health issues before you inevitably die, unfortunately. So understanding that, you can kind of hopefully map out your life a bit differently. And obviously, hopefully, you and I are very far away from the ends of our lives. So we're kind of
Knock
focusing
on
on the,
wood.
yeah, knock on wood, we're focusing on the earlier part. And for me, a big regret in my life was, I was fortunate enough to drop out of college, start a business when I was in my early 20s and actually make a lot of money, relatively speaking, in my early 20s. And I saved the majority of it. And obviously it's better that to save it than to have like lost it or wasted it or whatever. But I do actually regret saving so much of it because there were things at that time that I could have done with it that would have had higher utility than simply, investing it back into my own deals. Or let's say I didn't do this, but the S&P 500, which is going to give me, 8-10% per year, right? I could have done investments that would have yielded me 100% return or 1,000% return by perhaps investing more aggressively into my business by hiring the right people or going to the right conference, which opened the right doors, or even as simple as enjoying the money at a younger age because I'd be able to live on with those memories in perpetuity.
Yeah, there are different times and phases in your life when you can do certain things, and then that window can close. So, for example, when in your 20s, you can do like backpacking travel, across the world and stay at youth hostels, and that is perfectly comfortable for a lot of 20 somethings in a way that for most of us it becomes uncomfortable by the time we're in our 40s, right? Like that window kind of closes. But these are the sorts of things that, like you said, you can do with your money when you're young. So there are so many different ways of thinking about that time optimization with money. And I love that concept that you opened with of there are times in your children's life when maybe they could use the money more than by the time that they're at retirement age, right? In their 60s. So I love all of that. One thing that has always struck me about this philosophy of die with zero is that most retirement planning revolves around the worst case scenario, right? Like you have to be super conservative about it because none of us know how long we're going to live or what our health expenses are going to be in retirement. So everyone is ultra conservative about their retirement planning, so they end up underspending throughout their retirement. So how can you avoid running out of money before you die if you're spending more of it or giving away more of it while you're alive, since none of us can predict that ultimate departure date?
For sure. Well, I'm definitely not an expert on this,
Sure.
considering, like I just said, my focus is on more so today rather than the end of my life. But the book talks about different financial products like annuities and some sort of, medical bonds or buying certain health insurance, like customizing your health insurance at the end of your life to ensure that you have the kind of catastrophe covered, like you mentioned, given that those things are more likely to occur and also you're more likely to the end of running out. So I think those, if you have a desire, I think there's a way to put those things in place and to plan ahead for those. An annuity is a very straightforward thing. You make a payment today, and then for the rest of your life, you're going to get that fixed income that's going to cover your baseline of expenses, let's say. For me, my philosophy today, and obviously I'm very young, so that this could change. My philosophy is to do something and build something that I never want to retire from, which is like in itself an insurance policy or a retirement plan, right? Because if I build something that I love and I do a good job of it, it does two things. One, it keeps me working longer, which I think is great on many levels because, unfortunately, you hear a lot about people retiring and then they kind of lose their purpose and they go crazy and things don't go so well for them. So I think working for as long as possible by choice is really one of the keys to a successful life. And the other thing, too, as an entrepreneur, which I'm sure there's listeners of this podcast that own their own business, a really interesting concept is building your business to be able to sell it, but not necessarily to sell it, but just build it so that it could be sold, right? Because if you operate your business with that mindset, you are building it not necessarily so you have to sell to someone else and you just get this bag of money and you're done, but the business is set up in such a way that it can operate without you, and it's building an asset rather than a job for yourself. So the work truly does become optional, and it gives you that later life optionality.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to love about this philosophy, and one of the things that my co-founder Denny and I talk about a lot is lifestyle design and finding ways to switch to your ideal work sooner rather than later. Ideally like this year, like now. How can you ditch your high stress or golden handcuff kind of job and switch to your ideal work, even if it pays a little bit less, so that you're working on your own terms and you love what you do, like you mentioned, so that working isn't a chore and you're not just counting down the days until you retire, and you can end up working longer and earning longer in that ideal work that you love, even if it doesn't pay quite as much. So yeah, all of that speaks to me. And one final thought that I had as you were talking about this philosophy of die with zero is the stat that I've heard is that 95% of the time that we ever get to spend with our children is between when they're born and when they graduate high school. So after they graduate high school, 95% of the time that we have with them is gone. So you want to really optimize that time while you have it because that window will close. And that might involve spending more money in that period of your life, to be able to take more
Or
time off
earning
of
less in
work.
that period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe earning less or, taking more time away from work to, go travel with your kids or spend more time with them. So, yeah, that all kind of speaks to me. So I love it. So, Rob, in 30 seconds or less, how do you help people and how can people connect with you?
So I'm the founder and CEO of Lone Star Capital. We are a multifamily owner operator. We manage 5,000 apartments in Texas. And so we help investors who invest with us. We provide monthly distributions immediately after closing, which investors love. And we have a fantastic track record. We're vertically integrated, so we manage all our own properties, and we've been growing thoughtfully over the last 7 years.
Well, Rob, we really appreciate the fresh perspectives that you gave us today. And Unconventional Investor, if you got some fresh ideas out of this episode, pay them forward, pass it on to your friends, colleagues, coworkers, second cousin twice removed. And if you didn't get anything out of this episode, then email us and let us know why not or what you want to hear more of moving forward. Support@sparkfunnel.com. And if you really want to accelerate your investments and returns, join our co-investing club and check out sparkfunnel.com/free for a free course on passive real estate investing. And on that note, stay weird, unconventional investor.